Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you know, we're reading Where is Our Solar System? And now we're on chapter 8. But before we get into it, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm on a race with Skylord 11. Please, it would mean a lot to me. Alright, let's get into it. In 1961, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, JFK, made an important speech before a large audience in Houston, Texas. He declared that the United States would land a man on the moon, and it would happen before 1970. JFK convinced the U.S. Congress to pour millions of dollars into the U.S. space program. It was called NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Why did JFK want the United States to get to the moon so quickly? One reason was to show up the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had fought on the same side as the United States during World War II. However, after the war ended, the Soviet Union and the United States became enemies. The U.S. government didn't want the Soviet Union to get too powerful and try to rule other countries. One way to show power was to succeed in space missions. Space begins about 60 miles above Earth. The Soviet Union had launched a space program in 1957. The first man-made satellite was sent into space. A satellite is an object placed in orbit to gather information. The Soviet Union was called Sputnik 1 and was able to orbit the Earth in just 100 minutes. The U.S. government was worried. What if the Soviets made weapons factories in space and dropped missiles down on other countries? The United States wanted to get satellites in space too. The Soviet Union had talked about landing a man on the moon, so the United States wanted to do it first. The space race was on. Over the next few years, the Soviets had more success with space exploration than the United States did. In 1961, Russian Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. The Soviets called their space travelers cosmonauts. Cosmonaut means sailors of the universe. Americans use the term astronaut, which means sailor of the stars. In 1961, NASA began the Apollo program. The goal of the Apollo program was to send astronauts to the moon and bring them back. Each Apollo mission was numbered. Tragically, Apollo 1 ended even before it was launched. 3 astronauts were killed on the ground by a fire inside the Test Command Center. In December of 1968, Apollo 8 launched. It became the first spacecraft to orbit the moon. On Christmas Eve, the astronauts appeared on a televised broadcast. They beamed back pictures they had taken of the Earth and moon and read from the Bible. Even by the start of the last year of the decade, 1969, the United States still had not reached the moon, but neither had the Russians. On July 16th, Apollo 11 launched. Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins were the 3 American astronauts on board. It took 3 days to travel from Earth to the moon. Once they arrived, Collins stayed in the spacecraft while Armstrong and Aldrin transferred to a smaller craft named the Eagle. As soon as it touched down on the moon's surface, Armstrong reported the Eagle has landed. Armstrong stepped outside of the craft and placed his foot on the moon. He said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Together, Armstrong and Aldrin walked on the moon for over 2 hours. collecting samples and taking photographs. They also left an American flag on a flagpole. Millions of people all over the world watched the two astronauts on their television. When the astronauts returned home, they were welcomed as heroes. JFK was no longer alive, but his dream had come true. After the moon landing of 1969, there were several more Apollo missions in 1972. In 1972, the crew of Apollo 17 sent a photograph of Earth from space. The photo shows what became known as the blue marble because that's what Earth looked like. Apollo 17 was the last Apollo mission. By 1972, a total of 12 astronauts had walked on the moon. Once the United States had completed these missions first, the Soviet Union wasn't interested in going to the moon anymore. The space race ended in 1975. Exploration of space, however, it still goes on. Many different missions have gone to space since the space race ended. And that's Chapter 8. Thank you for listening. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. See you next time.